the army here who eventually gave the people their victory, throwing down their weapons and joining them on Wednesday.
Yes, we are with the people. People is, I'm a people, I'm all.
Ceaușescu, caput!
ITN was the first television crew to arrive, confirmation for the people that change had really come.
I want to say to all the world, be with us, don't let Ceaușescu's security kill us!
A people's army, loosely organised but now well armed, has sprung up in most places.
If it is necessary, we fight with these bombs.
With the petrol bombs?
Yes.
The members of Ceaușescu's secret police rained automatic fire on the television studios, whose defenders replied with gunfire and their petrol bombs.
We are really with them, and I think that the Romanian people will win.
Christmas morning on the Bucharest battlefield. Soldiers enjoy a break in the fighting.
Life remains in turmoil, but Romanians are somehow managing to think about Christmas.
The execution of the deposed Romanian leader and his wife was announced tonight on state television. After making the official announcement, the newscaster gave us his personal reaction. It's Romania's best Christmas present ever, he said.
Very good day for me.
Well, we've seen a tide of liberty sweep across Eastern Europe in the last 12 months, one nation after another. And now it seems that the people of Romania have taken liberty for themselves.
It's all over. We are a free country, and we are proud to be Romanian. For the first time, we are very proud to be here.
Until now, Romania has shown no sign of being affected by the dramatic changes which have swept through the rest of Eastern Europe. Yet life here is harsher than anywhere else in the Eastern Bloc. Long queues form in food shops where much of the produce is rationed. This shop was filmed secretly last week. Each person was allowed only 10 eggs a month, 1 packet of butter, 2 pounds of cheese and the same quantity of raw meat. The temperature was 17 degrees below zero, but no one has heating in their homes. It's this man, Father Laszlo Tokes, who's at the centre of the protests. This picture shows an interview he gave to Hungarian television a short while ago, in which he criticised President Ceaușescu. His punishment from the Romanian authorities for this was house arrest.
The problem for Ceaușescu is that he must isolate people like that before they get a following. If they do, then he will be on the road to repeating the performance of other Stalinist leaders throughout Eastern Europe. Ceaușescu's aim, therefore, was to isolate him straight from the beginning. However, Father Tokes was not a man to be isolated easily. He refused to leave his church, and he had the support of his parishioners. It was this that sparked off the demonstrations in Timisoara.
A Romanian exile in Budapest quotes eyewitnesses interviewed on a Hungarian radio, talking of several hundred dead.
But what I heard on the news is that about 300 or 400 people were killed in Timisoara, and the army has surrounded the town, and the demonstration and the rising up has gone towards another town, Arad. They are shooting people. Tanks are all over the towns, and people are firing. I mean, the soldiers are firing to the population, and about 300 or 400 people were killed so far.
You ask why there isn't any opposition. Why isn't there anyone working against the regime? Why isn't there anyone trying to overthrow Ceaușescu? The punishments are very severe. The authorities know how to use the individual's love of his family and of his children. If you say something against the regime, you are taken off for an interrogation, and the consequences of that can be many.
I have never believed that his position is as strong as it was made out in the West. I think a lot of people in the leadership, especially his most immediate cronies, must be wondering at the moment whether it is not worth their while changing the horse on which they betted for the last 25 years. They must be watching the other East European countries, and they must be realizing that if they support Ceaușescu to the end, they will have to pay the price.
Throughout the morning, staff at the Free Romanian newspaper tried unsuccessfully to update the news reports from Timisoara and Bucharest. With this month's edition of the paper already gone to press, thousands of inserts were being printed denouncing the killings.
Down with the dictatorship of the Ceaușescu's clan, down with the communism, long live the fight of the Romanian people for freedom.
Only last month, the paper had warned of a Tiananmen Square response from the authorities. Today, the talk here was of a popular uprising in response to the killings.
Ceaușescu has given here an example of his brutality. This is a lesson he took from Tiananmen Square in China, and he applied brutally in Romania.
You talk about revolt. Would it be possible to lead and organize revolt after suffering these sort of casualties so quickly?
Maybe this movement from Timisoara will spread in the big cities of Romania. We hope so.
Thousands of Romanians from across Europe will gather in London on Thursday to protest against the slaughter of their countrymen.
A Romanian now safely in Hungary says her family saw how the ensuing riot was suppressed.
Pregnant women were shot, children were shot, and of course students who started this demonstration. The army is out. It's the beginning of a war.
There are reports of further shooting in Timisoara today, but the British ambassador says the capital remains calm.
It appears normal, but there are extra security forces on the streets of Bucharest today, mixed groups of security men and armed members of the Patriotic Guard.
11 years ago, when Nicolae Ceaușescu was the Queen's honoured guest, today Her Majesty's government used the strongest language it could to express its sense of outrage at what's happened in Romania. The Romanian ambassador was called into the Foreign Office to be told that Britain, quote, condemned in the strongest possible terms the violent suppression of a peaceful demonstration. And the Foreign Office Minister, William Waldegrave, said Britain had the right to do what it could to hasten the downfall of the Ceaușescu regime.
I just have the feeling that this sandcastle will be swept away by the tide in due course, and it's simply a matter of how many Romanians have to suffer before the Ceaușescus, the whole family, recognize the inevitability of what is happening across Eastern Europe.
In Brussels, the Soviet foreign minister referred to the unpleasant things that had happened in Romania.
If indeed a tragedy has happened and people have died, I can only express my very, very profound regret over that. As for my overall fundamental approach, the base fundamental approach of the Soviet leadership, we are categorically opposed to the use of force.
Later, Mr. Shevardnadze flew to London for talks first with the Foreign Secretary and then with Mrs. Thatcher. In their public statements, neither referred directly to Romania, but government sources said later that while discussing Eastern Europe, both of them had expressed their concern about what was going on there. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.
Dawn at the Hungarian-Romanian border, just 50 miles north of Timisoara. Scarce traffic and scarce news. Security men in watchtowers ensuring Romania remains isolated. We're told even at this hour this is normally a bustling border post with busy two-way traffic. But this morning we've seen no one at all come through from Romania and only a few trucks go through from Hungary. Beyond this sealed border crossing, Romania's crisis has worsened. No one knows whether President Ceaușescu has crushed an isolated revolt or started a civil war. Heavily armed guards patrol every crossing point. Their orders simple: to keep foreigners out and Romanians in. ITN passed through the first border check and passed a sign saying welcome to Romania. But a short time later, we were stopped at gunpoint and ordered to turn back. Later, several foreign cars passed through the checkpoint out of Romania, carrying terrified passengers escaping the country's bloodshed. These men told us they'd just returned from Timisoara. Neither were allowed into the centre of the town. They said police and army escorted them elsewhere. One said his friend had seen the events of Saturday and that he himself, seeing the security there now, was frightened for the townspeople. Both said their colleagues had heard of more trouble in 2 other cities. This could harden Romania's resolve to keep foreigners out and their own people in. Some had made the 60-mile journey here from Timisoara. One student told me that 3 of his friends were missing. He assumed they were dead. He said he'd been in his room all weekend, too terrified to go out. He saw tanks, helicopters, he heard gunfire. He said the hospitals were overflowing and that every doctor in Romania had been called to Timisoara to give help to the dying and the wounded. In Budapest this evening, students gathered at the Romanian embassy. Some have started a hunger strike in protest at the deaths. Their campaign's been intensified tonight by reports that Romanian citizens across the border are now armed and preparing for more conflict with the authorities. Penny Marshall, News at 10 on the Romanian border.
My name is Sandu Pobereznik. I'm the president of Old Union Romanian branch in London.
Okay. What have you heard from Romania?
Well, we heard a lot of shooting, thousands of people, and I think must be the truth. A lot of military, which they never want to shoot the people, they want to shoot the children. They've been shot dead by the officer or by the secret police.
How easy are you finding to get any information?
The information starts to come slowly, but it looks like the whole situation spread all over Romania. We've got information in Moldova, even to Constanța, which is the port of the Black Sea.
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, in my view, I think very soon the Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceaușescu will be overthrown with his family.
Do you think there will be much more bloodshed first?
Well, we don't want to, but it looks like it's not going very easy. He's not going to leave the power and go. And if we have to, to push more, we'll have to.
What happens when you try and get any information out of the Romanian embassy here? Well,
they just, put the phone down. They don't answer any call, they don't speak with anybody.
What would you like the British government to do?
Well, I would like not only British government, we would like all the governments in the world to make a real strong protest about that, plus to make a blockade of not buying any goods of Romania, because if Romanian reached today where it reached, sold all the food of Romanian to Russia, 67%, and the rest to Europe, America, and Israeli, which have a lot of contracts with Romania.
Have you got relatives over there?
Well, it's my father nearly dying, and I've got two sisters. I spoke with my brother-in-law last night, and he said, well, I'll see you soon here. So something is moving on there.
But are you worried for their safety?
Well, I am, but you pay the price. I think Romanians today, they pay the price which some other East European country, they pay in 53, 56, 68 when I was in the army. And Romanian at that time fool us everywhere, you know, Ceaușescu.
Today's shootings in Bucharest started after a humiliation for President Ceaușescu, heckled and shouted down at today's Showpiece Workers' Rally. Of course, no anti-government demonstrators were shown by the Romanian state-controlled television. They transmitted only the party loyalists waving their banners at the front of the huge crowd. Nevertheless, it's clear what happened. Ceaușescu had meant to use this occasion to blame the unrest in the west of his country on fascists and hooligans. But at the height of his speech, he clearly falters as he hears the shouts of protest from the crowd. An official steps forward, and that's how the official transmission was ended. On the state radio, the protesters were swiftly drowned by military music. The protesters had gathered on the outskirts of the crowd. Several reporters from Eastern Bloc countries were there to witness what happened next. And the Soviet news agency TASS told how troops and tanks were used against thousands of demonstrators. The security forces used tear gas and automatic rifle fire. People hid in doorways in panic. Large numbers of army trucks and fire engines have been brought into Bucharest. All approaches to the presidential palace and Communist Party headquarters have been blocked by army units. The Yugoslavian news agency Tanjug gave these details of the fighting. Clashes in Bucharest turned into bloody riots with police firing into the crowd. Armoured vehicles ran over students while police shot at everything that moved. Several thousand people, mostly students and schoolchildren, were surrounded by troops and police. They opened fire. Many people were wounded and probably killed. From Hungary, the Foreign Ministry reported on clashes between security forces and the secret police who are under Ceaușescu's personal control. A serious political movement against the Romanian president is in existence. Outside Bucharest, anti-government protests have continued today in the west of the country. In Timisoara, workers have apparently threatened to blow up their factories unless Ceaușescu resigns. But the troubles have also spread significantly to the far northern city of Suceava. These are the first pictures of Timisoara to reach the west since last weekend. They show police and the public on the streets and some of the damage done in the rioting.
This, so far as we can see, is a massacre which makes that in Tiananmen Square seem quite small, appalling though the Tiananmen Square massacre is. The world community really must make its feelings known, and Britain, as a democracy, ought to be in the forefront of that.
The sudden downfall of Ceaușescu filtered through to the border this morning, disbelieving guards shaking their heads, speechless with emotion. Still, the old ways die hard, and the border chief was awaiting further orders.
We are part of the military forces and we are waiting for orders, till the new orders.
Minutes later, some firm news came through and the barriers were opened. It was then that the chief for the first time allowed his composure to drop. A small statement from one man as his government and his rulebook fell away. 2 days ago, we were turned back from this border post at gunpoint. This morning, the same men who did that have been laughing and smiling with us, and eventually they were able to welcome us with open hearts into Romania. Penny Marshall, ITN, in Romania.
Now we'll join ITN for the news headlines.
Good morning. Within the last few minutes, there have been reports from the Romanian capital, Bucharest, that the government has crumbled and that people are celebrating in the streets. One Western diplomat in the city says it looks like the end of the regime. The Bulgarian news agency says that people are climbing on tanks and embracing soldiers. The column of troops and citizens is moving towards President Ceaușescu's residence. The Dutch ambassador to the country has told ITN that government officials have left their offices.
We think that the government has, that it has crumbled. These are reports which American diplomats, eyewitnesses gave that the government had left the Central Committee buildings, the government buildings. The Minister of Defense, this was officially announced on radio, has committed suicide. The information was that the Securitate forces have withdrawn from the center. Well, in the square, there's tribulation in town. There are trucks with flag-waving people in the streets.
The leaders of East and
Well, we might lose a little bit on, you might drink from the floor, you know?
They gathered in their thousands last night at Berlin's historic
Sorry!
That was a good one.
Yeah. It's like a rally. Sorry, we haven't got the precise measure.
The moment all Berlin had been waiting for since the momentous...
Cheers. Haven't got the glass?
Cheers!
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 Who hasn't got the glass?
Noroc!
My God!
Romania!
Romania! Well, I'll have... Is there any more?
Yo, take mine.
You don't drink?
No.
You think
I want water.
Cheers.
Cheers. Well done.
Romania, say Noroc. Noroc to Romania.
Noroc
to Romania. Okay, Noroc. Well, they say in English cheers as well. It looks a little bit dull, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
They passed it from the embassy out.
Yeah, we have to call
And they were supposed, 6 months ago to write about me. I don't know, the last minute.
Cheers!
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 And this is for the
Thank you
death.
for ITM,
This is
support
for the
us
death
very much.
Of Romania. This,
And
this is for the martyrs of
Timisoara
and
Bucharest. Yes, and will be on Sunday on a Russian church, 12 o'clock, a big mass.
Cheers!
Molly, come on!
Cheers!
And
I will show you.
Take a one. Cheers!
I mean, cheers!
Prime Minister, what do you make of news that Romania's president has fallen from power?
Well, we've seen a tide of liberty sweep across Eastern Europe in the last 12 months, one nation after another. Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, East Germany, Czechoslovakia. And now it seems from reports we've been receiving in the last hour that the people of Romania have taken liberty for themselves. That's wonderful news, very good news. I think we should just spare a thought for the very courageous people who just weren't prepared to knuckle under against the blood-stained tyranny, and who led the protest and paid for it with their lives. They'll be real heroes in Romania's history, and we should just think about them and their families this Christmas. And of course, assuming that all the news that we've heard is true, we welcome Romania to the family of free nations and hope that she will soon get a fully democratic system and once again play her full part in European matters.
What action, if any, will Britain take now?
But we shall take, in conjunction with our European community ministers who are together today, they have another meeting today, so they're all together, we shall offer Romania the same kind of help that we've offered to others. And I imagine that she'll have to get an IMF agreement. But of course we offer help to those who are coming out of tyranny into the light of democracy.
What effect will this have on NATO and the Warsaw Pact?
I can't think that it will have any different effect from the others. We want those structures to stay in place because we are negotiating arms reductions through them, and because you can best accommodate these great changes against a background of stability and security, both for the nations of NATO and for the Soviet Union. And I think once again, you know, none of this would have happened but for the vision of President Gorbachev. It's fascinating. It is one of the greatest stories of history. It's only just over 12 months since I visited Poland, November 1988. Since then, one communist government after another has been swept away. In some countries it's come from a movement of the people. In others it has been some of the communist leaders joining Mr. Gorbachev and say, this is no system for people. It brings them neither dignity nor prosperity. But it really is, just pause for a moment, it's been a fantastic year. One of the most historic years we shall ever live through in our decade, and we now have to harness it for keeping peace and building a more prosperous Europe.
What do you think will happen in Romania now?
Well, news is coming in the whole time. I hope that they'll follow other nations and that the new government has taken over will arrange free elections and within a reasonable period. But it's very good news. Isn't it marvellous for Christmas time? Absolutely wonderful.
Won't Mr. Gorbachev be concerned with his empire crumbling now?
No, Mr. Gorbachev, don't forget, Mr. Gorbachev led by saying the kind of thing we're experiencing in the Soviet Union gives people neither dignity, nor liberty, nor prosperity. It must change. He made it quite clear that the countries of Eastern Europe could and would welcome a change from what they'd had from a communist system they'd had to reform. And he was encouraging it the whole way. Romania, as you know, broke free during Brezhnev's time from the more rigid control of the Soviet Union, but she has been had a very tyrannical regime. It really is wonderful news for the people of Romania, wonderful news at Christmas, wonderful news for all of us.
Would you expect any more bloodshed now at all?
I most earnestly hope that.
It's good news, it's just sad that it's come so late. This was a dictator who had cut himself off from his own people, from the world outside, who didn't get the message, which has brought other regimes in Eastern Europe to yield to democracy. He didn't get the message, started to kill his own people, and that's a tragedy. But I'm not entirely surprised. I didn't think that the movement sweeping through Eastern Europe would leave Romania alone, though it might have lasted a bit longer.
Inexplicably, the TV channel, which normally broadcasts for just 2 hours a night, played music over its station logo. In the center was Corneliu Mănescu, a former foreign minister who had fallen into disgrace after signing an open letter criticizing Ceaușescu.
There's talks with the government. We want to talk to those who are still in positions of power. Not use your weapons. Do not shoot people. You are Romanians, like all of us. The same heart beats in your breast as in our breast. We are not armed. We don't even have knives or stones.
Next, a dissident poet, Mitya Dinescu, took the studio floor. His excited manner contradicted his words. He was appealing for the nation for calm.
Foreign ministers met in emergency session in Brussels today and have promised immediate aid to a new Romanian government. The Romanian ambassador to London saw Foreign Office officials but refused to comment tonight. But Mrs. Thatcher, a Downing Street welcome to the People's Revolution.
I think we should just spare a thought for the very courageous.
Did you get that?
who just bloodstained tyranny and who led the protest and paid for it with their lives. They'll be real heroes.
From Bucharest, reading a resolution to the Congress of People's Deputies, welcoming the changes in Romania at what he called an...
Like we done it in the... but not on my suit, my dear. I was doing on his suit. Okay. Take
Come on, everybody, come on. Okay. Long live to Romania! Free Romania! Free Romania!
By the way, all the fight has ceased.
Has it finished? Yeah.
Desfaceți mai mulți, măi, șampanie!
Crească România liberă!
Crească România liberă! Hai să cântăm ceva!
Crească România liberă!
Deșteaptă România!
Cu mâna cei cu inima română să învârtim ora frăției pe pământul României. Barbarea din hol de piară, piară, dușmanii din țară, pentru noi să nu mai fie de hol și armonie. Mai muntene, moarte cu frățire și moarte cu...
You're not drinking on duty, do you?
Amândoi suntem mamă, dor, mândură și de o seamă, ți-ți
Da, păi acolo am spus să le duci. Nu aici, acolo la față, să le facem și acolo.
În fața ambasadei. Acolo sărbătorim mulțim.
Da? Nu știam ce.
Facem privestirea și mi-ați dat.
Vasile, iată, puteți fă o după asta.
Să o fac eu pe asta?
Nu după aia.
Hai, ai luat și țigară. Noroc,
Nu zgâduite.
Nu.
Mai sunt pahare.
Da?
Băi, nu sunt pahare, la ce le desfaceți aici? Duceți-vă la pahare. Duceți-vă la pahare.
M-a făcut prea tare.
The Romanian embassy in Budapest has been shuttered up, the staff inside besieged by the demonstrators. They've been angry for the last 5 days. Now they're jubilant. The cars driving past have been joining in the barrage of noise, needing little encouragement from the Sound Your Horns banner. On the pavement, a hunger strike has been going on since the weekend. The protesters first heard the news from Bucharest on Hungarian radio. Not even the most optimistic expected events to move so fast. Everyone's reaction, it's unbelievable. It's fantastic. Even by the standards of the incredible events in East Europe in recent weeks, this is a truly historic, emotional occasion. These people here aren't just Hungarians and Romanians celebrating the downfall of an evil dictator. This is the whole of East Europe joined together in happiness. Gabi Rado, ITN, Budapest.
The Soviet parliament today voiced serious concern at events in Romania. News of Ceaușescu's fall, flashed on electronic screens, was welcomed.
It was immoral dictatorship, and it came to its logical end.
It's great. It's monument.
Any army which would participate in attacking and killing its own people, they are criminals.
The Speaker of the Soviet Parliament was more cautious about the collapse of a communist regime. After today, he said, real communism in Romania is stronger. The official news agency TASS has provided dramatic eyewitness accounts of fighting in Bucharest. The Soviet press has made clear its disapproval of Ceaușescu. Events in Romania make dramatic but uncomfortable viewing for the Kremlin leadership. The perestroika they pioneered and encouraged has had its bloodiest victory so far. Bill Neely, ITN, Moscow.
The gateway to Timisoara, and behind it the town which first dared to challenge President Ceaușescu's regime. First the children ran to greet us, bringing us news their parents had just told them.
Ceaușescu criminal! Ceaușescu caput!
Lorries hooted in celebration. exuberant citizens welcoming us to share their newfound hope. After a week of terror, they talked of liberation. Even the smallest child found voice. ITN was the first television crew to arrive, confirmation for the people that change had really come.
ITN. English. Television.
Go to cemetery. The dead people are there.
At their graveyard, more people were gathering. They claimed some of the victims from the shooting had been buried here in a mass unmarked grave. Now they were digging them up. They claimed this was the proof of their massacre. We saw the bodies of 30 young men, and as these, the poorer people of the town, prayed, they alleged thousands more had been burnt to cover up the atrocity. They said their tears were for those who'd not lived to see this day. As night fell, Timisoara's citizens took to the streets. In what seemed like just a few minutes, thousands had gathered, their singing drowning the memory of gunfire. And out of this political struggle, on the balcony, a new reformist group emerged, virgin leaders calling themselves the Romanian Democratic Front. But tonight, the crowds only knew their old enemy. We have no fear, they shouted, proud of their fight, even of their dead.
It's very wonderful.
We are not afraid of security. No, not afraid of security.
No.
We fight from Saturday night. We fight all the time.
Sunday night, this with army. And we don't need this because we are not hooligan and
no fascists. We are no
fascists.
No hooligan. We are people. We are people. Working people. We are. And I want to say to all the world, be with us. Don't let Ceaușescu's security kill us. Kill us.
It was the army here who eventually gave the people their victory, throwing down their weapons and joining them on Wednesday. Tonight, they were with them on the balcony. And then, joining them, throwing out bread and wine to the jubilant crowds. The last time the people of Timisoara gathered in this square, they were shot at. Tonight, they've come back to claim their victory. There are calls here for political reform, but above all, the feelings of the people behind me are one of enormous relief that President Ceaușescu has gone. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Timisoara in Romania.
Chanting liberty, liberty, the Romanian people and large sections of the army joined forces on the streets of Bucharest last night to protect their newfound freedom. The largest crowds gathered around the television station, which has become the headquarters of the freedom movement. Young men armed with automatic weapons guarded entrances to the studios. Units of the army joined the defenders. They were expecting a counterattack from troops loyal to President Ceaușescu. Many young civilians prepared for the confrontation, armed with nothing more than courage and a handful of homemade petrol bombs.
If it is necessary, we fight with these bombs.
With the petrol bombs?
Yes, yes. We are prepared here.
Do you have other weapons?
No, we have any weapons. This is improvisation.
The attack came just after 1 o'clock in the morning. Civilians caught in the crossfire as members of Ceaușescu's secret police rained automatic fire on the television studios, whose defenders replied with gunfire and their petrol bombs. Inside the besieged television studios, tension as rumours circulated that the deposed president's agents had already infiltrated the building. All eyes and guns were trained on the lift shafts. The television workers say the secret police have tunnels leading here inside the television station. The reason their guns are pointed at the elevators is that they can't be sure just who will come through those doors next. The battle outside raged for more than 3 hours. It ended suddenly with the arrival of more tanks opposed to the old communist regime. It's now after 5 o'clock in the morning, the shooting has finally finished, and the revolutionaries are still in charge of the television station. The crowd celebrated their victory as ambulances ferried away the casualties and the army launched a mopping-up operation, pursuing those forces still loyal to Ceaușescu, often coming under sniper fire, as they chased an elusive enemy away from the city centre out into the suburbs. Paul Davies, ITN, Bucharest.
Today in Timisoara, the army continued to side with the people, their silent tanks symbols of their promise. Together, the army and demonstrators outnumber the security men, but the shooting has left each individual terrified, alone in the face of indiscriminate gunfire, fear and debris erasing hope. And in the neighbouring town of Arad, more shooting. This mother asked us for a gun to protect her child from the tyranny. At the town's hospital, panic broke out. Somewhere, somehow, people were inside shooting.
Daytime saw the resumption of fierce fighting, again centred on the battered television centre. Army units, tanks and unarmed civilians again forming a defensive circle around the buildings, coming under fire from snipers and returning countless thousands of rounds at the apartments where they believed troops loyal to Ceaușescu were holed up. At the height of the battle, a cry for help. Risking his life, a soldier crawls toward an injured colleague. Astonishingly, there's a pause in the battle as the critically wounded soldier is carried to a makeshift ambulance, which will ferry him to a hospital already struggling to cope with the many hundreds of dead and injured. The lull lasts just a few seconds, then the guns open up again. Civilians caught in the crossfire wait for a chance to escape. Some even risk their lives carrying supplies of food into the defenders of the TV station. This battle has now been going on for almost 24 hours, but despite all their firepower, the troops are not able to winkle out those men still loyal to Ceaușescu. If anything, the fighting intensifies as the day wears on. Both sides obviously seeing control of the state television service as vital to their cause. Not only are the studios now being used as a headquarters by the new government of national salvation, but prisoners, including former ministers and close aides of the deposed President Ceaușescu, are being brought here to be interrogated. This evening, the revolutionaries are digging in, bringing in more armour, ready for the fresh offensive that's expected tonight. Paul Davies, ITN, Bucharest.
The international airport remains sealed. Tanks flying the liberation colours block the only road out to the city 10 miles away, protecting the terminal against pro-Ceaușescu forces still fighting hard in the immediate area. After fierce gun battles all night, at least 20 soldiers from both sides have been killed here alone. Many more are injured. Over 30 pro-Ceaușescu prisoners are now being held in the airport complex. On the airfield itself, the distant runways are blocked with civilian trucks. And what used to be President Ceaușescu's private 707 lies idle on the tarmac. Sources say the former dictator's in hiding, his son's arrested. Anti-Ceaușescu forces are pinning their hopes on unconfirmed reports that the Soviet troops may well land at the airport to lend assistance in their fight against the dictator's forces. Many of them say they're already running desperately short of ammunition against increased incoming attacks. Here at Bucharest airport, a fierce gun battle has now been going on more or less continuously for several hours between the army and forces still loyal to the Ceaușescu regime. They've been using tanks, heavy artillery and machine gun. The dead and injured are still being brought into the main terminal building. TV screens played martial music. The fighting continued for more than 18 hours, with over 300 civilians huddled for safety in the centre of the terminal building. In the cold light of dawn, the tanks became visible, bearing the flag of an army now supporting civilians against Ceaușescu. They were joined by militiamen and even civilians armed with obsolete rifles.
In front of the paint-spattered walls of the ambassador's residence, Hungarians gathered with Romanian exiles, both united in their revulsion over the killings and both united in their grief. But there was also time for pride.
A friend of mine who talked to her mother in Romania for the past 2 days, she was always getting very short answer, only yes, yes, yes. Thought her mother, 60-year-old mother, is still afraid. She found out at 2 o'clock last night that in fact she was out in the streets fighting and she didn't want to worry her daughter. We are really with them, and I think that the Romanian people will win.
At the Romanian embassy, the ambassador announced his support for the revolution and asked for immediate emergency aid.
From medical support, we have need of drugs, we have especially antibiotics, we have need of plasma, we have need of all sorts of medicine for wounded people.
And this afternoon, the first load of those medical supplies was on its way. Antibiotics, plasma and drugs, all donated by the people of Britain, and they'll reach Bucharest in 3 days' time. Last night, there was champagne and celebrations outside the ambassador's residence. Tonight, as they listened for news from home, yesterday's euphoria was replaced by the realization that the full price is yet to be paid for their country's freedom.
This is a pro-democratic front checkpoint, jointly controlled by soldiers and citizens, deep inside the region of Transylvania. They're standing solidly behind each other.
Yes, we are with the people. People is, I'm a people, I'm all.
A people's army, loosely organized but now well armed, has sprung up in most places. They are deeply suspicious of all strangers, particularly foreigners, and will shoot on sight anyone failing to stop or subject themselves to searches. There is still tension and fear among many Romanians. You could see it on these faces. The raised voice announced we were Westerners. They instantly warmed up, declaring this rural area a newly liberated zone, with the army at its head. The garrison commander ushered us into his headquarters. There was no safe passage to the capital, he said. All travel is fraught with danger. Terrorists, as they describe the Ceaușescu loyalists, are still killing people. He sketched out a safe route. In the countryside, close to Bucharest, army tanks have taken up positions along key routes. This was the 46th checkpoint we crossed since entering the country. This was Bucharest at dawn this morning. Many people stand only yards from the battle lines, examining their army's performance against the surviving remnants of Ceaușescu's hated and feared security forces. Here fighting for control of the telecommunications center.
There are many people who want to stop us, but I think they cannot do it now. It's all over. We are a free country, and we are proud to be Romanian. For the first time, we are very proud to be here.
Life remains in turmoil, with petrol desperately scarce, but Romanians are somehow managing to think about Christmas. And with the army's strength firmly behind them, the crowds who go out and cheer on their loyalist forces believe a total victory for democracy cannot be far away. Brent Sadler, ITN, Bucharest.
The people now control the roads in and out of Timisoara, but if attacked, they could never hold them. Some of them shouted, "Give us guns, we cannot fight alone." And so some of them were given guns, but it makes little difference. This local militia guarded a bridge, but there were no bullets for the rifles. Only the officer had ammunition, 5 rounds to last a civil war. In Timisoara, people power is a new concept. It's used by gangs who stop cars to search for the enemy, security policemen, but it's often a simple demonstration of an authority hitherto long denied. There are tanks now in the city centre, where crowds gathered 2 nights ago to acclaim freedom and were then fired upon. The square is now littered with posters brought to protest and bottles which have been brought to celebrate. The army continually broadcasts messages for the enemy to surrender, but they haven't yet, not in Timisoara. No one knows yet how many citizens died here. About 100 security policemen have been jailed so far, 10 were caught today. This army officer said that they would go on trial. The punishments would match their crimes. He said the populace would judge them and some would be shot. So Christmas Eve in the square at Timisoara, where it all began just a week ago. It looks now as though the army are in control of most parts of this city, but only by day. At dusk, the troops prepare for another night of pursuing snipers. Colin Baker, ITN, Timisoara.
Outside the television station, which doubles as the headquarters of Romania's new interim government, hundreds of soldiers and a defensive ring of tanks and armoured cars, for this building is now the prized target for those forces still loyal to President Ceaușescu. For several hours last night and early this morning, some of the fiercest street battles were fought in the area around the TV station. Dawn brought a temporary halt to the fighting, but no one expected the pause would last for long. Most of these young soldiers and their armour arrived here last night. They say they'll remain until their new leaders no longer need their protection. There was time for a change of socks, a snatched breakfast, and a delivery of fresh ammunition before the troops were called into action again, preparing for what appeared to be the 4th attack on their headquarters in 48 hours. They said they'd come under sniper fire from supporters of the old regime. Tanks replied, machine gunning the buildings where it's believed the snipers are hiding. Even as the television station came under sniper attack, key workers needed to keep the TV centre operational were guided in from the streets to do their work. Keeping television-free Romania on air no matter what is a priority of the new government. Television tonight showed pictures of President Ceaușescu's daughter Zoe arrested at her Bucharest home. She had with her dogs and quantities of jewellery and money.
It's for English television. Do you know what is going to happen now?
Later we found Zoe Ceaușescu in the TV station waiting to be interrogated. She was clearly in a state of shock, not helped by the battles raging outside. Paul Davies, ITN, Bucharest. Christmas morning on the Bucharest battlefield. Soldiers who've spent the last 3 days under fire protecting the television station, which is home to the new interim government, enjoy a break in the fighting. There's even time to erect a Christmas tree outside the TV centre. But few are celebrating. The cost of their new freedom has been too high. Inside the building, a man who spent 72 hours defending the centre is told his wife and 2 young boys were killed on Christmas Eve night in fighting elsewhere in the city. Today, the battle for the TV centre was reduced to occasional exchanges between the army defending the new leadership and snipers loyal to deposed President Ceaușescu. The television centre has been hit by thousands of rounds but is still broadcasting. It means ordinary Romanians and the outside world can now see exactly what's happening in this country, free from the old regime's secrecy and censorship. We've seen pictures of army tanks supporting the new leaders controlling the Transylvanian countryside 250 miles from the capital, and heard peasants there describe how Ceaușescu's secret police committed massacres before the army took over. Latest pictures from the mountain town of Brașov show soldiers engaged in street battles with forces loyal to Ceaușescu. From around the country there are reports of the president's secret police staging bloody last stands. Those who survive are taken into custody. As a direct result of television pictures reaching the outside world, the first relief supplies have arrived in Romania. A bus full of medicine from France greeted by grateful Romanians at the border. Paul Davies, ITN, Bucharest.
A avut loc procesul lui Nicolae Ceaușescu.
The execution of the deposed Romanian leader and his wife was announced tonight on state television. The newscaster said the Ceaușescus had been made to stand trial on Christmas Day. They were charged with genocide, murdering 60,000 victims, with abusing their power, destroying public buildings and undermining the national economy. The president was accused of smuggling $1 billion of the country's wealth out to foreign bank accounts. The newscaster said on all these grave charges, the Ceaușescus had been found guilty and shot to death. After making the official announcement, the newscaster gave us his personal reaction. It's Romania's best Christmas present ever, he said. Elsewhere in the TV station, headquarters of the new regime, there was unashamed celebration.
In my opinion, it was too easy for them. You know, it was just a civilized execution when we are all, for so many years, tortured by these guys.
ITN here inside the headquarters of the new regime has learnt tonight that on the day the president was executed, there was a last abortive attempt by his supporters to free him. It ended in bloodshed. A dozen members of Ceaușescu's secret police who tried to storm a Ministry of Defence building where they thought their leader was being held were gunned down. A short time later, their president met a similar fate. Paul Davies, ITN, Bucharest.
Outside the windows of the ward, a soldier who's just died is taken away for burial. On this Christmas Day in Timisoara, the dying and the suffering continue. December the 25th is usually a normal working day here. Today, the men of violence upheld that tradition, refusing appeals to surrender. Morning and afternoon, the city echoed to the sound of gunfire as the army clashed with remnants of the security forces, the Securitate. Most of the fighting was centred around the Continental Hotel close to the city centre. It's an area, it seems, chosen for the Securitate's final determined stand. The army have virtually no experience of this kind of street warfare. After each engagement, there are no follow-up searches. Suspect buildings are left unchecked and the soldiers withdraw to patrol elsewhere. In this construction yard, about 50 gunmen fought with troops for several hours. Despite prolonged bursts of firing, the military appeared to suffer no casualties. It's unclear whether any of the opposition were hit or captured. No matter how big a military presence there is on the streets of Timisoara, the Securitate seem capable of taking on the military just when and where they please. This skirmish that's taking place here now, and it's only lunchtime, is one of about half a dozen that have taken place today so far. But even gun battles couldn't suppress the newfound voice of freedom of speech. In the main square, a few hundred gathered to hear speeches and to make them. Tonight, soldiers have been firing flares around the hotel looking for snipers, but so far the area has been mostly quiet. Most of the streets are being patrolled by soldiers. So far, with few civilians around, there's been little reaction to Ceaușescu's death. Colin Baker, ITN, Timisoara. The bells of Timisoara ring out not to mourn the death of a president, but to celebrate a new beginning. Many people died in the square. Buildings are pockmarked with bullet holes. Below, the tracks of the armoured cars responsible for the killings have become a candlelit memorial to the dead. The chief of the secret police, Colonel Ceaușescu, has now been arrested at home. We were told it was crammed with luxury goods, food and drink. Colonel Ceaușescu is now in prison awaiting trial. It's highly unlikely he'll be allowed to keep his luxuries. It's unlikely he'll be allowed to keep his life. A woman accused of being one of his agents was held this morning by factory workers. Handed over to a People's Committee, she waited nervously as they debated what to do with her. They gave her to the army. Outside, the factory workers who brought her in cheer and celebrate the removal of a spy from their midst. There's also an air of anticipation. They're about to take part in their first ever free elections. In this, the biggest factory in Timisoara, departmental heads with instructions from the workers meet to elect a new factory committee. They're not used to debate, freedom of choice is alien, but democracy hard won is soon established. And on the shop floor, the elections are a point of fierce debate. Democracy is catching on in Timisoara. Yesterday's man is dead. The slogans and posters of a 24-year reign can now be destroyed. Colin Baker, ITN, Timisoara.
This morning, the television station is once again under new management. The younger, more liberal-minded technicians are calling the shots. They say they will broadcast proof that the president is dead to show that the old days of censorship and bureaucracy are over.
Adeziunea aceasta unanimă ostașilor față de această revoluție formidabilă realizată de poporul nostru, dar și hotărârea, această libertate, ocrotind-o cu piepturile lor tinere. Revoluția a învins. Armata e, cum vă amintiți, simțim, trăim la cele mai înalte cote ale simțământelor noastre patriotice acest adevăr de necontestat. Pe baricade în apărarea Revoluției. Cald, impresionante au expus străzii, liber la datorie, Palatul Telefonelor e curățat, lupta continuă, până la capăt. Iată alte și alte reportaje, titluri care nu mai sunt altădată cam ceea ce ar vrea să cuprindă un articol din acesta fluviu. Sunt articole scurte, subtare, ziariști militari, pentru această această remarcabilă faptă care, îmi permiteți să afirm, reprezintă un dar de anul. Ceea ce simte, ceea ce trăiește, cum muncește țara, cum gândesc oamenii, cum a fost primită aceasta, un omagiu pe care îl aducem tuturor acestor bravi militari, anonim pentru noi, nu le cunoaștem numele, dar oameni care nu pregetă zi și noapte să fie pe frontul acesta al luptei cu un inamic crud, neiertător, dar pe care suntem convinși, ca și ei, că vom ști să-l...
Today, freezing temperatures posed the greatest threat to the troops dug in around the television station, home of the new Romanian government. It was the first time in 3 days that the TV centre had not come under overnight attack. Time to attend to basic needs for men who'd spent 72 hours pinned down by sniper fire. Today, the new government moved out from the television centre for the first time since its formation, meeting nearby at the Foreign Ministry. Ministers were promising an end to old-style communism. New Foreign Minister Cornelia Bogdan was asked if the new regime approved of the swift execution of the old president and his wife.
Yes. Other question.
He then laid out the new government's priorities.
The first objective is to stabilize the situation, to finish with the terrorist activity, and then to start constructive work, to put the structure to work and to make the economy work, and to prepare for the elections.
The leader of Romania's students said the sacrifice of the dead demanded more than cosmetic change.
A democratic government, a government that should have nothing in common with communism.
This man is taking advantage of the remarkable changes to form a new party to represent the Hungarian minority in Romania.
We are going to live our most beautiful life we could ever imagine.
As the roundup of secret police officers continues, those forces loyal to the dead president have been told they'll face summary justice and a firing squad unless they lay down their weapons and surrender tomorrow. Paul Davies, News at 10, Bucharest.
Well, for a start, I can tell you it's very much calmer here. I've hardly heard a single shot since last night. As far as the revenge goes against the security force members, I saw around Palace Square this morning a body lying in one of the side streets where people were spitting over the corpse. That gives you an idea of the kind of thoughts that people have of the instruments of repression against them for the past 25 years. There is a great deal of uncertainty about what's happening as far as the provisional government is concerned. There are other rival groups setting up, trying to challenge and trying to make their points of view more public and are demanding more airtime on the television, which of course is controlled by the provisional government. There is no sense of any outpouring of joy here on the streets of Bucharest because the legacy that Ceaușescu left behind is one of fear and uncertainty. Now back to the studio in London.
Timisoara's prison gates now offer protection for the hundreds of captured Securitate inside and the people outside who want vengeance. Beyond the gates, lines of soldiers protect the men Romanians call terrorists, the men who killed to order. And to make room for these new prisoners, others are walking free. Political prisoners tasting liberty as Ceaușescu's men face capture, bewildered, alone, to stand trial in the People's Court. A mile away, the Securitate's headquarters now stand empty, the final stronghold of Ceaușescu's men destroyed by the army. The battle for this building lasted 3 days, and the soldiers who fought it told us that none of their men were killed, that no one from Securitate survived. Young troops, proud to have overcome the internal enemy, are incredulous of their victory. Good day?
Yes, very good day for me.
Did you believe today would be like this?
I don't believe, but it's true.
Meanwhile, in the town centre, the army appeared to calm the crowds calling for revenge. They promised that any remaining Securitate found on the streets after dusk tonight would be shot on sight. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Timisoara.
By day, a sense of order is returning, though not normality. Timisoara will never be the same. Hard-won freedom is preciously guarded. Daily life and movement protected. Now there's bread when before it was scarce. People are beginning to realize the significance of what's happened here and how this town was a catalyst for Romania's revolution. The revolution that swept Romania began here at this church 2 weeks ago when the Securitate came to evict the Hungarian priest Laszlo Turkish, who'd spoken out against Ceaușescu's policies. A crowd formed a human chain around the church to protect him, setting off a series of events that was to completely change the face of Romania. The priest appealed to the people for help.
I participated in the church at the sermon, and the priest told us, dear people, on Friday they want to take me away from you. Be here with me.
The security police kept coming back and beat up the priest, but as the threats increased, so did the crowd. By Sunday, thousands had gathered in the main squares, confronting the authorities, demanding freedom and an end to Ceaușescu's tyranny. At first, the military responded with water cannon, then it was bullets. Women and children were at the front of the crowd, but it didn't stop the firing. The people thought the army would never attack Timisoara's children, but they were wrong. There's a lot of anger against the army for that, but some say it wasn't their fault.
It was the security forces dressed up like the army, in the same uniforms. They only have different badges. They also shot officers of the army from behind, which refused to obey orders. That's what really happened. The army didn't shoot the people, nowhere.
For 2 days the protests were silenced, but on Wednesday the crowds came back to the square demanding the bodies of the many victims. Firing or not into the crowd, for 3 days the army had pointed their weapons at the people. Now, though, they decided they could do it no more and changed sides. Their sights were to be trained not now on the people, but the Securitate. What followed was 3 days of all-out warfare, and the fighting still not over. It's clear that on several occasions here, security forces fired on the people, shooting many. But what's more difficult to establish is the numbers involved. Some reports have suggested up to 8,000 people may have been killed, but verifying it's another matter. The true figure for the number of killings may never be known. Only a small amount of bodies have been uncovered at this piece of waste ground. It's claimed they were dumped here, some of them having been tortured first. At the main hospital in Timisoara, doctors say they saw no more than 150 bodies. How many people do you think were killed in Timisoara?
The order of thousands. I am not sure. I cannot say for sure.
So, wouldn't you expect yourself to see more bodies if there were thousands killed?
Yes, and I believe that after these things are cooled down, we could find another graveyards like this.
As people here read for the first time in their lives about what's happened to them, outsiders are asking, why Timisoara? Here they say years of deprivation, now being remedied with emergency supplies, was a tinderbox waiting to be ignited. But Ceaușescu's legacy has left abiding problems for the country.
He left Romania which must be changed. He left a people whose mentality is so closely tied, so closed in itself, that there are so many things we must do before we will move into democracy. So he left Romania in ruins.
Before we left the professor's home, his neighbours invited us in to celebrate their first ever Christmas. It's hard to believe that before they might have been shot for this.
At Romanian TV, the focal point of the revolution, they insist the trial of Ceaușescu and his wife was a proper one, and its screening was crucial for the public good.
I think it was a necessary move. The trial was not secret, as it was falsely announced by some of the media correspondents here. It was public, but for security measures, those attending the trial were not shown because they were living targets for the snipers.
Now Ceaușescu's dead, most people hope the secret policemen have given up the fight. And today the new government gave the Securitate a deadline of 5 p.m. tomorrow to surrender.
If they do, they'll go through a trial in a democratic court of law, and they'll be judged, each one according to the crimes committed, and they are going to be given penalties according to the gravity of what they did. If they do not surrender until the deadline, then they are going to, if caught, according to the decree which was issued today, it's very likely they'll get the maximum penalty.
The National Salvation Front also decreed an end to Ceaușescu's ban on abortions and to his systemization program, in which drab, featureless concrete blocks were to replace Romania's traditional multi-ethnic villages. The program was only carried out extensively in one province south of Bucharest. Many of the blocks of flats lie empty, uninhabitable, because of the atrocious standards of workmanship.
The Romanian people had every reason to suspect that Ceaușescu had these complexes built because they helped his secret police keep an eye on them far more easily than if they lived in separate cottages. At the height of Ceaușescu's power, it was thought that 1 out of every 3 or 4 people were informers, paid or blackmailed into serving the Securitate.
Now that the fighting seems to be over, the centre of Bucharest has become a more or less cheerful armed camp. There's plenty of evidence of the horrors of the past week. But the heavy military presence is somehow not oppressive. It is rather a reminder of the alliance between army and people, which has given Romania its new hope for the future. Gabirado, ITN, Bucharest.
Well, the amazing thing about this revolution, John, is that it's actually based on this building here. And for that reason, it really isn't that difficult, once you are here inside the building, to tell the world what's happening. We've had the biggest battles fought right outside the walls where we are now. And the fact that we're able to sit here and talk to you shows exactly who has won those battles. We've got the leaders coming in and meeting just a few yards from where I'm sitting in a studio just along the corridor. It really does mean that because of the marvellous efforts of the people here, we are able to broadcast to you the information as it happens in the same way as they're able to tell the Romanian people for the first time in years what's going on. And that really is quite remarkable when you consider that this building now looks from the outside something like a Swiss cheese. It's taken so much gunfire and yet it's still operating. The one thing that the gunfire has failed to hit is that transmitter up on the roof. And because of that, we're able to talk to you, and hopefully the Romanian people see this television station as a way of cutting short the bloodshed and getting some sort of peaceful existence back here.
The Romanian army hunts down the secret police. One of Ceaușescu's brothers hangs himself in Vienna. Good evening. Large numbers of Romania's secret police appear to have defied the new government's ultimatum to surrender or face a firing squad. Many did give themselves up and laid down their weapons, but government ministers are still under tight army security in case of assassination attempts. In other developments today, a brother of the executed dictator Margaret Ceaușescu was found hanged in the Romanian trade mission in Vienna where he worked. He apparently committed suicide. In Ceaușescu's hometown of Scornicest, 3 of his close relatives were arrested. His sister was found with tens of thousands of pounds worth of cash and cheques. Tonight, a Sunday Times photographer, Ian Parry, was killed when a Romanian relief plane he was on crashed near Bucharest airport. For the day's events in Romania, we're going over live now to Trevor MacDonald in Bucharest.
Good evening from Bucharest, where I'm speaking to you live from the grounds of the British Embassy. Leaders of the new Romania are still struggling to consolidate the gains of their new revolution tonight, watched nervously by friends and enemies. Some friends, students, long denied a free voice in this country, were today openly challenging the legitimacy of the new order. For the revolution's enemies, the surrender or die deadline expired this afternoon, but as Vernon Mann reports, there was no large-scale surrender from the Securitate.
No one expected mass surrender from men who dabbled with deadly chemicals like these uncovered in a basement laboratory at Securitate headquarters by the army today. Files of concoctions unidentifiable to us. Take it from me, said an army officer, these are dangerous poisons. This had been a fully equipped laboratory manufacturing chemicals of the type thought to have been used to poison the water supply at Sibiu in Transylvania. Ammunition too, Securitate were never short of that. The only thing missing, the files, the names of Ceaușescu's 2 million secret policemen, still at large. At the university's central registry, the room used by Securitate sealed and locked, files supposedly inside, the key missing, staff and students paranoid. And tension still on the streets a week into this revolution. Who are these 2 million men and women? More importantly, where are they? So as students gathered at Bucharest's oldest university to democratically elect new non-communist leaders, soldiers were checking rooms for Securitate terrorists, making sure this first free meeting of the fraternity could take place in safety. The students broke off their holidays for this first chance to speak openly without fear of punishment, and once the building had been declared secure, without fear of attack. Meetings like this are taking place in universities, factories and offices all over Romania, casting off remnants of the old order and democratically ushering in the new. But there is widespread suspicion. The students were addressed by a representative on the Committee of National Salvation. Who elected you, the students wanted to know. He reminded them that this new democracy should not be allowed to sour into anarchy. Vernon Mann, News at 10, Bucharest.
In Timisoara, where the revolution began, life is slowly returning to normal despite sporadic gunfire at night. Penny Marshall has been out with one of the army patrols hunting the secret police, who are still holding out.
Today, the army in Timisoara gave the terrorists a final deadline to surrender or be shot. We were taken inside the army headquarters minutes after that deadline passed. There we were shown some of the weapons and equipment brought in by a defeated gunman.
This is a mask, a terrorist mask. He put it on his head to don't be recognized. These are equipment for listening, for intercepting calls and such things. And this is a gun which was used. Those are bullets, the explosive bullets.
This is one of the thousands of bullets that's been handed in or found on the streets here in Timisoara. For the army, it's confirmation that they've been dealing with a specially trained force, because it's the type of bullet they've never seen before. The general responsible for the amnesty said it had brought calm to the city.
People are coming. A lot of them are coming to surrender, and they're still surrendering.
But minutes later, his men were again alerted to suspected terrorist movements. The battle not yet over, young troops and volunteers set out again to face the enemy. A battle-torn building and fears of what lay ahead. But anger too from these men and a readiness to kill in revenge. The terrorists had escaped out of the top of the building, fleeing over the adjoining rooftops, running for their lives over the homes of the people they've been killing. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Timisoara.
The single most unifying force of this revolution is the absolute detestation of everything the Ceaușescus stood for. But still, there is here a deep-seated worry that remaining pro-Ceaușescu elements could still upset the calculations of the new government. Today, our reporter Paul Davies met one government minister in circumstances which showed just how seriously the ministers take the business of day-to-day survival.
Mihail Montanu, Romania's new Minister of Organisation, conducts his business on a hotline connecting him with the outside world. A small army guards the foreign ministry, where the government leaders based here live and work under constant threat of assassination. To meet the minister, you must satisfy one guard after another that you are not a member of Ceaușescu's secret police. There are soldiers in the corridors, guards at the lift, personal bodyguards around the minister's office. 9 separate security checks before you reach the man Ceaușescu's forces would like to kill.
Minister. Glad to see you.
Good morning, Minister. You're not an easy man to reach.
Montanu has not been able to leave this office since the new regime took over.
When did you last go home?
I went 7 days ago.
You had difficulty remembering?
Yes, yes.
How long do you think you'll have to live like this?
I don't know. Really, I don't know. I don't know. But I hope very soon, very, very soon, to have the possibilities, go home and to see my family.
The minister sleeps just a few yards from his desk.
My first breakfast after 3 days. Yes.
After 3 days?
Yes, 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 yes.
And here?
And here is my bed where I sleep, but very short.
There have been several assassination attempts. It'll be some time yet before the new minister can leave his fortress and return to his family. Paul Davies, News at 10, Bucharest.
Tonight in Romania, there's a great sense of the unknown about the future course of this revolution. And perhaps that's because the Romanian people have no reference point in their quest for democracy. Quite simply, they aren't quite sure just where they go from here. From Bucharest, back to you in London, Sandy.
And that's the news from us tonight. Good night.
The tyrant's last public appearance. It's now known that even as President Ceaușescu addressed the crowd from the balcony of his palace last Thursday, making one last attempt to end the protests sweeping through his country, he already had an escape plan worked out. ITN has learnt that when the president's speech was drowned by an angry crowd, that plan went into operation. The president and his wife fled the capital the next morning in a helicopter, which carried them to a pre-arranged meeting with his chauffeur-driven car. That night, they ran into a roadblock like this one. They were 60 miles west of the capital. Captain Mihai Lupoi, the army representative in the new government, was called to the scene.
He was stopped by the policeman, and the policeman recognized him and told the people around, he is the president. They took him as a prisoner with the wife.
A crowd of people
yes,
mobbed the car then?
Yes, and they took him prisoner and gave him to the military unit. You saw in the movie, on the television, that he gets out of an armored car. Now I can tell you that he lived for 3 days in that armored car, and the armored car was washed and moved inside the unit as nobody was inside.
So that vehicle was
Yes.
his prison?
Yes.
For 3 days?
Yes. And during these 3 days, he refused to take his daily dose of insulin.
Now, at the time that he was being held in an armoured car, some 100 kilometres outside of Bucharest, the secret police tried to attack a building here in the city, and a lot of them died. They just got it totally wrong, did they?
Yes, that's correct. But as long as he was alive, they had a chance to survive. Then that's the reason we decided to judge and shoot him immediately.
The gates of the driveway are opened for us to see what's been kept from the people of Timisoara. This is Ceaușescu's home in the second city, a specially built 60s villa. Soldiers now guard the former president's pastimes. Pawn takes king. A luxury mineral water bath. Everything to keep the president and his wife amused. Boots for hunting. The soldiers told us the animals used to be drugged first so Ceaușescu could catch them more easily. But one home wasn't enough. Ceaușescu annexed the People's Art Museum next door. Despite the luxury, it's some 3 or 4 years since the Ceaușescus last stayed here. We were told he felt increasingly unwelcome in Timisoara. It's not hard to see how rumours of such opulence fuel the people's sense of injustice. All this for a couple who claimed at their televised trial they didn't possess any houses of their own. The new guardians of the 2 Timisoara residences couldn't believe what they'd discovered.
Am rămas surprins. I was surprised when I entered here first, and I was also hurt. I was hurt when I saw so much space, so many rooms, so much furniture unused.
Indignarea a fost extraordinar de mare.
My indignation when I got here was very strong, especially because I thought of the 2 ways of living, the way of living here and the way of living of the population. No hot water, sometimes no cold water, no electricity, no central heating.
Miserabil.
Ceaușescu also surrounded himself with books, his own. The hundreds credited to him contain mainly copies of his speeches, his obsession with his international status reflected in this homage. In it, a collection of photographs taken with world leaders and politicians, here Mrs. Thatcher in 1975. There are messages of goodwill on his 60th birthday from Prime Minister Callahan, the then East German leader Erich Honecker, and the infamous Pol Pot. Ceaușescu appeared to convince everyone he was a man of the people.
Why was this able to go on for so long? Why did you accept the hypocrisy?
We had to accept it because of the Securitate forces, because the Securitate belonged to him, because, as people say, there was, every 5th was a member of the Securitate.
Until now, no outsiders have seen inside Timisoara's Securitate headquarters, only just captured after days of fierce fighting. The corridor below is littered with debris. Some rooms are wrecked, their occupants forced to leave in a hurry. But well guarded on an upper floor, one room remains untouched. Here, never seen before, we found thousands of files used to manipulate and destroy lives in Timisoara. In Bucharest, such files have been burned. Here intact, they're still reluctant to discuss them.
Are the records of informers kept here? Is that what that is?
Da. Yes, they are.
Will they be published now?
Nu depinde de noi, nu hotărâm noi. It is not up to him.
As the task of eliminating the Securitate goes on, so does that of blanking out Ceaușescu's memory. But the continuing tension here is evidence enough that his legacy will not be so easily eradicated.
The Prime Minister's office, protected by the army from would-be assassins, an elite bodyguard around his door, as Petre Roman outlines his vision of Romania's future.
We are talking a consensus for rebuild the country, because Ceaușescu has led now in a disaster, economically, socially. We haven't now a basis to be a civilized society. We have very reliable information that parachutists, the aerial troops, were prepared to invade the place. It was a military camp, not very well protected. And if the dictator would have been released, then it would be really blood, and again blood.
Prime Minister Roman says tomorrow's headlines will tell that the street war with Ceaușescu's secret police has now been won. Paul Davies, ITN, Bucharest.
There was peace in Timisoara at midnight as the new year dawned. Families gathering together quietly in their homes, embracing those who'd fought, and with drops of savoured wine, remembering those who died for a new Romania. For the grandparents, history remembered, and for the grandchildren, the future embraced. This morning, Timisoara's cathedral bells called the people to prayer. The Archbishop arriving for a special service to honour the town and its dead. Hundreds are still missing in Timisoara. Their relatives, unable to trace them, now fear they must be dead. They turn to the church for comfort. This morning they gathered to light candles, some in memory and some in hope. One candle was lit for Timisoara's firstborn of the new year, this child, Alexander. For him, 1989 and Ceaușescu's Romania will only ever be history. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Timisoara.